Hello everybody and welcome back to another My Porch Prints tutorials. This is Kyra and today is the second day of our Thanks a Million event where we are going to be giving away freebies and having sales every day of the week to celebrate hitting 1 million sales in our Etsy shop, and we just wanted to give back to our community and say thank you. So if you haven't already heard, we are going to be having this event all week long, and yesterday on Monday we had a 50% off sale on mini books and fussy cuts, as well as giving away a Keepsakes journal kit. That's right, an entire journal kit, which is still available. If you go to yesterday's video, and down in the description box you will find a link to our Google Drive where we have dropped the entire freebie kit for you. And you'll want to make sure to go pick up that kit for today's video because I will be using some of the papers from that kit in today's tutorial. So hop on over to that video, snag that kit, and then come back to this one. And if you take a look at yesterday's video, it should have all of the complete details for what's going on this week. So if you're curious about anything, that video should have all of that information, including the fact that we are going to be giving away a free add-on kit every day to one lucky winner who comments under the daily video. So every day we will release a video tutorial giving away a freebie, and then you can also comment under that video and we will pick a winner to win the add-on kit. And one lucky winner is going to actually win the journal that I am making this week. So this journal that you see here, the journal cover that we're making, is going to be the journal cover for the journal I'm giving away. So that's kind of fun. And we will be announcing all of those winners on Sunday in our video that will come out that day. So again, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the sales and announcements and giveaways that we're doing this week. You don't want to miss any of these videos. All right, enough of all that sales stuff. Let's get into the actual tutorial today. So I'm going to be showing you how to create a journal cover from start to finish using the freebie cover and spine available down in the description box. And this cover is going to be a little complex. It's going to include a lot of familiar tricks that you might have seen before if you've been on the channel, including things like a lace window in the spine. But I'm also going to be doing a couple of new things like transferring an inkjet printed image to wood and creating a ruffled edge from scratch using a gathering technique. So it's going to be an interesting journey. So come along with me as I make this cover. Lots of fun stuff to get into. So let's jump right in here and talk about supplies. So obviously, you're going to be needing the printable cover and spine, the freebie that I mentioned earlier. I printed these out on cardstock, and you will see that at the top of these printables, it will give you some instructions for, how to print them or whatever, and then a little bit of information at the bottom too. So feel free to read all of that at your own discretion. But I went ahead and printed out my cover twice, so that gives me a front and back cover. And then there are multiple spines to choose from. You can pick the size that you like best. I am going to be working with the 2-inch spine for today's video, just because I kind of like the way that looks and that seems like a good size to me. Alright, so print those out on cardstock, set those aside, and then you're going to be needing some sort of ribbon to make the ruffle around your journal. Now I don't actually know what brand this is because the top of the ribbon spool fell off a long time ago. The main detail to remember is that you want it to be pliable, like it should be a soft, bendable ribbon. And if you don't want to do the effort of creating a ruffle from scratch, a little cheat is that you could just take any kind of pretty lacy trim and just glue it around the border of the cover, and that will give you a sort of similar look without so much effort. And you'll also be needing some lace for the lace spine window that we'll be making. So just a little scrap piece of lace is fine. I do have a whole bunch that I picked up at a fabric store a long time ago. But any kind of lace that you have will do. You just need a small piece that will fit over the window. And I did soak mine in coffee to give it a bit more of a vintage look. So that's a little trick. If you have white lace, you can soak it in coffee and dye it to be a slightly more vintage color. And then I have these optional hardware corners. I will link these down below for you in our Amazon shop if you're interested. We also have a faux version in our Etsy shop that you can use as well if you want. Of course, you'll be needing an Exacto knife to cut out your lace window. And then from that Keepsakes journal kit that I mentioned earlier, I printed out 2 sheets of paper, just the same pattern twice. And you'll want to make sure that you're choosing the vertical papers, not the horizontal papers, otherwise it'll look kind of weird. So whichever papers you choose, just make sure that they are vertical. And you're going to need some for the inside of your cover and some for the outside. So this is the other paper I'm printing. Again, you'll need 2 of these printed vertically, and we'll be using these to cover the outside of the journal. And then again, this is kind of optional, but I am going to be using some chipboard pieces. These are 5.5 by 8.5 inch pieces of chipboard. Again, they will be linked in our Amazon shop. But these are basically going to be used to add stability to the covers of our journal. It's going to make them feel thicker, more substantial. And since I'm going to be adding this wood plaque to the cover, I really needed these covers not to bend under that weight. So that's what I'm using the chipboard for. Again, this is optional, but I do recommend using the chipboard. And then I grabbed this wood plaque that I found at the Dollar General, and we will be linking something similar down in the Amazon shop for you if you're interested. But I just saw this and thought it might make kind of a cute frame. So it's pretty lightweight, even though it's fairly thick. So I felt like this would make a good journal cover. So I'm going to be using this today to create kind of like a pretty sort of decorative frame on the cover of my journal. Again, you don't have to do this if you find something else that works for you, but this was pretty readily available, so I wanted to show it to you guys, and we'll be using it in today's video. All right, and to transfer an image to that wood plaque, you're going to need INKJET transparency film, which are these like thin plastic sheets that you can print on as if they were regular paper. And these are going to be kind of essential for transferring the image. So again, pick up some of that. And then to help with that transfer, we're going to be using Mod Podge. Now, the one that I have is gloss. I would recommend matte if you have it on hand. I don't, so I'm just gonna make do with the gloss that I have. But again, if you have matte, grab that instead. And then adding to our list of strong smelling craft supplies, we're going to be using some metallic gold spray paint. And I picked this up at the Dollar General as well, and it's worked fine for me. So anywhere you can get gold spray paint works perfect. And then I have some of this chain here. It's kind of like a goldish color, like a worn gold chain. And then I also have this string of pearls. And again, you can pick these up online or at various craft stores. And then I'll be using some paint. It's kind of optional. You'll see when you get to that point. And then FABRI glue, which works well for fabric, metal, paper, everything. So that's what I'll be using as my glue of choice today. And last but certainly not least, you'll be needing a cereal box. I'm using this Cheerios box, which has a spine that is roughly 2 inches. It's a little bit wider than that. This spine piece here of the box is going to become the spine of our journal, and then we will cut our covers from the front and back cover of the cereal box. So to create this cover, you'll need to measure out 5.5 by 8.5 inch covers, both front and back. But if you have that chipboard available, you can also use that to just trace around it, and that will give you the perfect cover size. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And it's important that you use the cereal box technique, not the like 2 chipboard and a chipboard spine piece that you might have seen on some of my other videos. You really need this to be one solid piece. Otherwise, when we cut out our lace window, it just won't have the stability it needs. So make sure that you use the cereal box technique for this cover. All right, so once we have the cereal box, now we need to cover it. Now, I thought that I could just cover kind of the spine with this one piece of paper and that my chipboard would be wide enough to cover the other sides. However, it turns out that my measurements are not perfect and you can kind of see a little bit of border here. So I'm just gonna recommend to you guys to print out 2 pieces of paper and overlap them on either side of the box, kind of like this. And then we can use those 2 pieces to cover the cover. So I'll kind of show you. I have to do a little bit of an awkward workaround now, but it's the same idea. Essentially, you're going to take your sheets, cover your spine, and we're going to glue our pieces down to the front cover, leaving a bit of a border, about 1 inch, half an inch of paper kind of sticking out from the edge of the cereal box. You'll sort of see what I mean here. So first things first, glue the panels down. Make sure that you use a good amount of glue here. We don't want things, you know, lifting or slipping or creating air bubbles. So go ahead, glue the panels down, just like this. And then when you flip it over to the other side, you can see I've got that border kind of sticking out here. And we're going to fold all of those edges in and glue them down. And that's going to create a nice seamless cover sort of wrap for the journal, just like this. And keep in mind, if your images are directional, that you have everything right side up. I've accidentally glued things down upside down before, so make sure that your images are facing the right way. And then we can go ahead and begin decorating our panels. So for these, this is where we're going to bring our printable freebie covers here. And I'm going to glue these down onto my chipboard covers. And I decided that I wanted to leave kind of a border around my cover so that you could kind of see the chipboard. So I'm actually going to trim the edges off, and there's already kind of a border in the image that you can kind of just follow those lines and just trim them down a little bit. And that's going to leave a little bit of the chipboard exposed, which of course you don't have to do. If you just want to cover the chipboard up entirely, that's fine. I liked the way it looked, so I'm gonna create a little border here. So once I've done that, I'm just going to glue those panels down like this. And I'm going to be adding some of those hardware corners that I mentioned earlier. Again, this is optional if you don't want to, but I think they look nice. So I'm going to add them to the 4 corners of this panel using some pliers to just kind of squeeze them down into place using kind of pressure. It's soft metal, so it's not hard to do. And then I'm going to glue these panels down directly to the front cover of my journal, just like this. And I like to kind of fold my journal closed so that I can make sure that everything is centered properly. I don't want it kind of like sticking off the side of the spine or anything like that. Just trying my best to get everything lined up. And we're going to do the same thing to both the front and the back cover. And now we can start working on the spine. So I'm going to cut out that 2-inch spine here like this. And I am going to be removing these 2 panels in the center. If you don't want to do the lace window, you can just glue this entire spine straight down to your journal spine on like the front cover and ignore this step. But I like the lace window, so I'm going to cut this little portion out and set that aside. Won't be needing it again. And then we're going to glue down these pieces onto our spine like this. So it's kind of up to you where you want to line things up, if you want them lower or higher, how big you want your lace window to be. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of line mine with the top and bottom of the journal cover like this. And then using a ruler, I'm going to make a line with a pencil and just kind of connect those spine pieces, the top and bottom. And this is going to give me a line to follow to cut out my lace window. So I'm just going to use my Exacto knife here and cut out this little rectangle and just take my time with it until it comes free like this. And there we have it. Now we have a window in our spine. So next up, you're going to need the lace that I mentioned earlier, just like a small piece of it, just large enough to cover that window. You'll want a little bit of extra just for tugging at the edges, because it's really important that you keep this lace taut as it is drying. So kind of tugging at the opposite edges and the opposite, like opposing corners, will help create that tension. Otherwise, when you know, have your window glued down, it'll kind of like bulge out awkwardly. So you want to keep this as tight as possible. All right, and it should look something like this. And when you cut out your window, it's possible that your edges of your paper will want to lift along the spine. So just add a little bit of glue in there and that should solve the problem. All right, so next up is creating the ruffled edge for the journal. Now, I did follow a tutorial on how to create like a gathering technique to create a ruffle. So I will link that video down below in case you want to listen to somebody who knows what they're talking about. But I will try to show you what I did here. So to start, we are going to need to take 3 times the length of or like the circumference of our journal. So in ribbon. So measure the outer edge of your journal, which mine turned out to be around 50 inches. And then you're going to want to multiply that by 3. So that gives me 150 inches of ribbon that I need. So any ribbon that you're using for this, make sure that you have at least, you know, that amount for your journal, because as the fabric bunches, you know, it gets smaller and smaller. So you need a lot to get it done. That's why it's 3 times the amount. And because my ribbon is so thin, I actually need to stitch it down to some scrap fabric. So I also need 150 inches of fabric. So I've got this little scrap panel here. So I'm gonna just go ahead and measure out as much ribbon as I need here. I need about like an inch and a half in width, and then obviously 150 inches in length. And I don't have 150 inches long piece of scrap. So what I actually did was I made 3 50-inch strips, and then I'll just kind of cut them into the lengths I need as I work here. So you'll kind of see as I go along how this is going to work. So go ahead and take your strips of ribbon and fabric, and we're going to start by stitching these 2 pieces together kind of along this like thin edge. And I'll be honest, I am rather lazy when it comes to crafting, sewing, anything really in general. But I did take the time to pin these 2 pieces together, and I do recommend doing that. I think it made my life a lot easier. So if you've got pins on hand, I picked up mine from the Dollar General. Just go ahead and pin those 2 pieces so that they're not sliding around. All right, so to start, you're gonna wanna make sure that you have plenty of extra thread here. That's really important. And then you want your tension to be set to around 3 or 4 on your machine. And you want to use the longest stitch you have. So for me, that's 10. Now, do I understand what any of that really means? I'll be honest, no. But that's what I was told to do, so that's what I'm telling you to do. All right, so as we begin here, something else to remember that's really important is that we are not doing any back stitching. No back stitching. Just one straight long stitch is what you want to do. So try your best to kind of keep things straight here, and then stitch these 2 pieces together. And as you go, you'll want to remove those pins. I almost forgot to do that here, so keep that in mind. Also, I had my pins going the wrong direction, so I had the sharp point pointing towards me. So I remembered on the next 2 to do it the other way around. But yeah, make sure that your pins are facing away from you so that you can pull them out easier. And that should make your life a lot simpler than it was for me. But I'm just gonna go ahead and continue to stitch these 2 pieces together here, just kind of taking my time and getting it done. So I'm just going to keep stitching, and then when you get to the end of your strip of ribbon, you'll want to remember, again, no back stitching here. So just keep sewing until the ribbon is free. Just kind of tug on it like this, and then you're going to want to pull it out and leave plenty of long string. This is really important. So no back stitching and lots of long string. So I'm going to cut it about right here, so leaving that long piece just like this. And you can see here I've got the stitch on the front and the back. I used slightly different colored string so that you can kind of see what I'm doing here. And when I stitched this, I didn't stitch things, like I didn't cut my ribbon perfectly straight. It's like a scrap piece of ribbon. So some of it is showing behind my lacy ribbon. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trim that down to the stitch because I don't want to see all of this ugly ribbon showing where my lace ribbon is, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna just go along here and kind of clean this edge up, and you can see that looks a lot nicer. The lace ribbon doesn't have so much of that white showing behind it, so if you've got the time and want to do that, I think it makes things look a little bit nicer. Alright, so now that we have our first stitch, we're going to be adding a second one. So taking that same piece here, again pulling out lots of extra string, and try not to get the string kind of tangled if as you work here. So pulling it out to the side, and we're going to be adding our second stitch next to our first one. I'm going to be putting it down kind of on my scrap fabric here. And the thing to remember that's really important is that you do not want these stitches to cross. If your stitches cross one another, like if they overlap even a little bit, that crossing is going to make it so this technique will not work. So it's really important to not cross your stitches. All right, so one long straight line, same as before, no back stitching. It's the same thing, just slightly to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and add my second line here. And again, when you reach the end, make sure that you leave lots of string and no back stitching. So go ahead and cut that. All right, and now we can begin with the actual gathering technique. So you'll have a stitch on the front and the back, and each of them will have 2 strings. So you can choose either set. I'm going to go ahead and grab this pair here at the front. And you're going to pull those until you create a little bit of tension here. You do not want to pull these really tight. That's super important, and I'll talk about why in a second here. But you're going to want to give these a little tug and then slide your fabric down those strings. And that's going to gather the fabric and create this little ruffle here. And what's nice about having the extra fabric is that it's going to create kind of like a nice base to glue into your journal, allowing you to have as much of the, pretty lace ribbon sticking out as possible. So this is just kind of my workaround for having too thin of a piece of ribbon, but I think it works pretty nicely. And don't worry if your fabric kind of bunches up awkwardly. As you go, you can kind of tug on it and straighten things out until it kind of looks the way you want. Whether you want like a really loose ruffle or a really tight ruffle, it's kind of up to you just based on how you kind of slide the fabric and create tension. All right. So a couple of mistakes I made that I want to mention really fast is one, my choice of scrap fabric. So my scrap fabric frays really easily, and I kind of forgot about that when I grabbed it. So that made a bit of a mess, something to think about. And then the second thing is to take your time and go slow and be gentle, otherwise you will snap your strings. And if you snap the string, it's okay because you do have 2 stitches, so you can slide the fabric along the 1 string you have left. Or if you snap both strings, you can move to the other end and pull and tug from that end instead, and that should work. But if you snap all 4 strings, you're kind of out of luck and you'll have to start over. So slow and gentle is the way to go. And then you can see here, I went ahead and just kind of repeated that process until I had enough fabric to create my border. And from here, I am going to just add some glue down, my FABRI glue, to my cover, and I'm going to glue the scrap fabric to the inside of the cover just like this. And I'm going to kind of position it so that where the 2 fabrics meet, that edge of my lace ribbon is kind of the top of my border. I hope that makes sense. I'll do a bit of a close-up here in a second, but you can see I'm just kind of continuing that process of adding glue and then laying out my ribbon where I think it looks nice in just little sections here, and then tugging and kind of forcing it into place until I think it looks right. And you can see here, this is what I meant by the border stitch kind of being the border of my journal. So it creates this nice little edge here. Looks pretty clean, I think, for my first attempt. Don't judge it too harshly, you guys. I was just trying to learn. And for this, I do recommend having extra fabric, like a little bit of extra length on your strips so that they can go around the corner in a nice sort of seamless flow. I think it looks nicer and it's easier to kind of hide where your strips kind of meet one another if you do it like on the side, versus if you try to connect them at the corner, it just doesn't look quite right. It looks a little awkward to have that perfect 90-degree corner, in my opinion. So yeah, I would recommend having like longer pieces to kind of round the corners nicely. So hope that made sense. All right, so I'm going to continue gluing down all of my little strips here. And if you keep your long strings and don't trim them until the end, you can use them to kind of tighten up your ruffles if they start to kind of come undone while you're working. So I saved my strings and then trimmed them off at the very end. And you can see this is how that turned out. So for my first attempt at making ruffles by hand, I am actually pretty proud with how this looks. It's about what I had pictured in my head. There are a couple, areas where the ruffles aren't perfectly even. So, it's still got a handmade quality. So I hope whoever wins this journal still enjoys it, even with its little quirks and mistakes. I was trying to learn here, but I think overall I'm really happy with it. So this was a labor of love, I will admit. Halfway through the process, I almost thought of quitting, but once it was done, I feel like it wasn't that difficult looking back, and it looks pretty cool. So I hope you'll give it a shot. All right, next we're going to move on to the wood transfer. So you'll need that plaque from earlier, some Mod Podge, a brush you don't care about, and then that inkjet transfer film. So something to keep in mind is if you have this printer setting, I would recommend choosing Vivid, like standard Vivid for your quality. That's going to put more ink on the paper and is going to give you more ink to transfer onto your wood. So I didn't do that for this first print, and you'll see the difference. I'll show you both if you don't use Vivid versus if you do. But first off, go ahead and load up your transfer paper into your printer. You want to make sure you're printing on the right side, and to test that, if you breathe on the transfer paper and see fog, that is the wrong side. The side that doesn't fog is the one you want to print on. And you'll want to work fairly quickly here because if the ink on your paper dries too much, it won't transfer as well. So in my rush, I ended up not using enough Mod Podge. You want a decent amount. Again, if it's too thick, it won't work, and if it's too thin, it won't work. So it's kind of a weird balance of how much you need. In this one, I didn't use quite enough, so when I peeled it back, the ink didn't transfer very well. So I got a real faded image that I didn't really love, so I'm gonna do it again. Luckily, this wood plaque has two sides, so you do kind of get two attempts here. So I'm going to print out my paper with the Vivid setting, and I'm going to use more Mod Podge. And also something else to note is that the image does go kind of green, and I think that might be because this wood is probably treated with some sort of chemicals. Again, it was from the Dollar General, so if you try this and you use a different wood surface or plaque, let me know, because I'm really curious to know, is it the Mod Podge? Is it the wood? Is it the print? I'm so curious to know why it's going green. All I can think is it might be the wood. So let me know if yours doesn't go green. I'm super curious. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a decent amount of Mod Podge here, and I am dabbing the edges because I wanted my transfer to not be a perfect line. I kind of wanted my edges to be kind of blended. And I am printing the image of the freebie cover to use here. I liked the floral image on it, so that's what I'm using. But you can print any image you want. So, go crazy, find an image you like. I'm gonna go ahead and use this one. And then you do want to smooth it out so that it's flat on the wood, but I made the mistake of pushing way too hard. You do not want to push hard because it will smear the ink, as I found out. So right here, this is me making a terrible mistake. So don't do as I'm doing, do as I say. Smooth it out, but gently, and then leave it alone. Otherwise, you're going to smear all that ink. But you can see the difference of using the Vivid print. It's much brighter of an image, and you do want to leave this on for about 3 minutes, no more, no less, before you pull back that paper. Otherwise you might glue the transfer paper to the wood, and you don't want to do that. So 3 minutes in total, and then peel it back, and you should have a pretty decent image transfer onto the wood here. And now I'm going to take it outside and grab my gold spray paint, and I'm going to add some gold spray paint around the edges. So be careful not to accidentally spray your image if you can help it. Just kind of angle the can away from the center, and then give yourself a couple of thin coats. And then if you want to, you can actually bring the spray paint closer to the wood and create like a thick layer. And as that dries and you continue to do that, you'll be able to create some texture to it. And I kind of liked that. I felt like it added some interesting, almost like metallic looking texture to it. I don't know, I liked it. So you don't have to do that, of course, but I liked it, so that's what I did. And once that is completely dry, we're going to take it back inside, and this is kind of how that turned out. Kind of a neat little gold plaque here with the floral detail, and it's not perfectly sharp or smooth, it's not going to be, but it does kind of have that rough vintage look, and that's kind of what I was going for. So you know, have realistic expectations with this, but this is how mine turned out. So I decided that I wanted to go a step further and create just a little bit of dimension here. Maybe it's overkill, hardly can see it when I'm done with this anyway, but I am going to mix some gold paint, like just acrylic paint, with a little bit of brown and black, and then I'm also going to take a little bit of water to kind of thin it out. And I'm going to paint this around the outside edge, like the border of the plaque. And I'm going to use a Kleenex or a paper towel, whatever you have, to kind of dab and smear that darker color. And this is just creating a little bit of dimension and a little bit of depth, making it look a little bit more worn and aged. So again, totally optional, but if you have the time and you want to do it, I think it just gives it a little bit more of a, you know, a final touch, a nice finish. All right. So also mine is glossy because again I used that glossy Mod Podge. If you use the matte one, you shouldn't have so much gloss, but just letting you know. Alright, so the next thing I'm doing is I'm taking my FABRI glue and I'm creating a small bead of glue around the outside border, and I'm taking this string that I have on hand, this white string, and some tweezers, and I'm just going to kind of follow the outline of my border. So just kind of taking my time here and slowly kind of manipulating that string into the right shape as I go here. This isn't as hard as you might think it is. So I actually did 3 total layers of this string, and this is kind of what that looks like when it's done. And then I'm going to take some chain and I'm going to do the same thing for my final 4th layer on the inside. So again, just kind of slowly manipulating it as I go here, and then using some wire cutters to cut that chain like this. And now it is ready to add to the cover. So I'm going to take my FABRI tack, and on the back side of the entire plaque here, I'm going to add a bunch of glue and then glue it down. So I'm just kind of eyeballing where the center of the cover is. And then I'm taking my glue again and creating another border, this time around the outside edge of the plaque. And I'm going to be using that string of pearls here to kind of follow around that border. And with the pearls, they're a little bit stiffer, so you do kind of have to slow down and hold things in place until they dry as you create the border. But as you go, it should, you know, morph to the shape and glue in place. And then I'm using a little bow here. These are linked in our Amazon shop if you're interested, to hide the seam where everything meets, just like this. And that is the sort of final plaque for the cover of my journal. And that is going to be the final touch on the outside of the cover. So we're going to move really quickly to the inside, and we're going to be covering it up just by creating a couple of quick panels here. So taking 2 of those sheets of paper that I mentioned earlier that I printed from the Keepsakes journal kit, that freebie kit that's available for everyone here, 2 vertical pages, and we're going to flip those over, and we're going to glue our last 2 chipboard panels down to the center. And then I'm gonna fold in these corners here just like this on all 4 corners and glue those in place. And then we're gonna take our edges here, these little panels, and we're going to fold those and glue those down as well. And that should give you a nice smooth sort of seamless wrap for both of these chipboard panels. And I went ahead and took some distress ink and went around the edges. I'm using the color Vintage Photo here just to add a little bit of warmth and a little bit of aging to these panels, making them look a little bit more lived in. And I'm going to be gluing these down to the inner and like the front and back covers. And if you think about it, I completely forgot to do this. This was the original plan, was to take some ribbon and glue it down behind the panel, and that way I would have ribbon to use as a closure to tie the journal closed. I completely forgot to do that, so I am going to be showing you how I fixed that later in the week on Friday when I do the faded photos freebie. I'll show you how I added in my ribbons, but for now I'm just going to glue these panels in as is, just like this. But if you want to do that, something to keep in mind. All right, so go ahead and make sure that you glue those down and hold them in place, let them dry. And this is gonna create a pretty thick cover here, but that's what we wanted. We wanted some substantial covers to hold that wood plaque without bending. So this is a nice sturdy journal. And once I had glued my panels in place, I did decide to add a little strip of ribbon here along this edge. I think it's going to make things look nicer when I add in my signatures. So I'm going to go ahead and add ribbon to sort of my spine edge on my front and back panel. And then I did decide last minute to add some extra corners too, to each of these panels. This would have been easier to do before gluing them down. So if you want to do that, that's what I recommend. And if you are the person that wins this journal, these corners are a little sharp. They're not real bad, but a little bit. So if you don't like them, because they're only held on there with pressure, feel free to grab a pair of pliers and just pop them off if you don't like the way that they look or feel. No offense taken if you decide you want to remove these. All right, so that is going to finish up today's video tutorial for how I created the cover for my Keepsakes journal. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you had fun and got some new ideas and inspiration to try. Again, this is the second day of our Thanks a Million event, so don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on the rest of the week's videos and all the freebies we'll be giving away and the winners that we will be announcing on Sunday. And yeah, make sure to comment down below so that you might end up being one of those winners. I'm really excited to keep making this journal and kind of show you guys how it evolves throughout the week. And I will see you in tomorrow's video. Bye!